So last week we talked about uh, Joshua chapter 1. And the series is called Now What?
Yep.
And in that we talked basically about, every place you place your foot, you can accept that, walk off the dimensions of the land. And then we ended with the card that you had that we gave you last week. And what did that card say? Do you remember?
It said, "Don't panic, hold your breath, it'll be okay."
Right. And some people came to me and said, "Man, that really helped me this week." And yeah, Teresa's got hers right there. But I think it's important. Don't panic, hold your breath. It'll be okay. That's a good thing for life, for every day. And sometimes we experience that. But it's been a good mantra.
Did you have an experience this past week where you had to tell yourself that?
Several. So let me tell you one that's the most fun. And this was a week or so ago. But it's about on Thursday morning, I get up early before daylight to go to my men's group, and a lot of my men's group guys are here, and it's a 6:30. And those of you in the men's group, if you want to attend that group, it's kind of an open door coffee thing. So I give an invitation to other guys if you want to show up. 6:30 in the activity center to about an hour. But before I went, it was about 6 o'clock at my house. And I've had a little back discomfort, so I bought one of these inverter tables. You've seen those inverter tables. You get on that, you hook your feet in, and it's kind of like a big seesaw, a teeter-totter. And you get the right height in there, and when you do, you lay back and you put your hand over your head, and you slowly go back, and you can kind of, you can literally go upside down, but you kind of work back and forth, and it helps expand the vertebrae, all this science. So I decided to do that before I went to men's group. And it's 6 o'clock and it's pitch dark in the living room. And I strap this thing in, and when I lean back, I flip upside down. My grandkids had adjusted it for their height, not at mine. So the fulcrum was here, was over here. I mean, I thought I was going to do a backflip. And I'm hanging upside down, and I don't know how I'm going to get out of this. My feet are trapped in. I don't want to hurt my back climbing back out. So I did the very humble thing. "Oh, Becky, are you awake?" "I am now. We have a problem, but but Becky, don't panic. Hold your breath, it'll be okay." And she came out and she rescued me. And
So
I
it was
appreciate
more
it.
for her, not for you.
That's
Definitely
right.
not
Yeah.
for you.
I was fine. I was upside down. No panic. So,
How's your back feel?
I haven't thought about it. When my humiliation is high, my back pain is very low. But some of you have those circumstances in your life where all of a sudden you can't panic, and we really would suggest panic is probably never the right thing. And sometimes holding your breath, maybe you need to breathe deeply, but either way, take a moment.
Right.
But I do believe it will be okay.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is important. So, but in that that's just one of the stories this week. So let me tell you about what's happening this week, and I'll kind of set the table for us.
With Joshua?
Yeah.
Okay.
In Joshua chapter 2, the story is this, and rather than read you the whole chapter, let me just tell the story. They're on the riverbank, and they're trying to decide what to do. They'd been here previously, and now it was time to figure out how they're going to conquer the land. So they sent 2 spies in to the land, and they forded the river. They went into the city of Jericho, and this city of Jericho, I've been there 6 times, and the foundation is still there. You get to stand there and say, "This is where the battle of Jericho was." It's right near the Jordan River. So I have a real mental picture when I'm telling you the story. But they went to the city, and when they went in, they stayed at where they could get lodging for the night. And back in that culture, in that day, they stayed at Rahab, the prostitute's house. So a lot of amenities when you stayed at the Holiday Inn back then.
Real quick, I know you called it Holiday Inn last night. I was like, maybe they should call it Holiday Sin. Sorry, that was just a Rita added.
That's brilliant. So they stayed at the Holiday Inn. But that's clever. But they spent the night there, and while they're spending the night there, the king finds out these guys had come from the other side of the river. And he sent some of his entourage over to say, "Bring them to me." So he goes to Rahab and said, "Hey, we understand you've got some guys here." And she goes, "I didn't know where they were from," and they left. And she saw the king's men coming and basically hid them upstairs on the roof of where she lived. So she said, "Maybe you should go find them. I think they left the city." So they went off to try to see them going back over the river, getting back. She hid the guys, and she made a deal with them. "Hey, because I've been good to you, when things come and you do attack the city, save, you can do something good for me. And they said, well, we'll save your family if you put this scarlet cord outside your window, because she was on the outside where the walls, there were actually rooms built into the wall of the city. And she put that cord there. When they attacked the city, anyone that was within her house would be saved. And that was kind of a, you helped us, we'll help you type deal.
It sounds like a throwback to Egypt, where they painted their the homes. Was that like a thing in the time? Did there's some sort of symbolism with the scarlet coloring and all that?
I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. It is definitely a throwback to the Passover, where they took the blood of the lamb, the red blood of the lamb, they put it on the door. Anyone within this house, if that symbol's there, then death will not come to you. So it really is a retelling of that story. That's a very good insight. But that's kind of what happened. Then the spies went back, and of course she had enough wisdom to say, hey guys, in the movies you see this all the time. You go, they run down the alley, then they run down the next alley. I said, why don't they just stop somewhere and just lay low and hide? But these guys, she said, look, don't go back the way you come. Go into the hill country when there's big mountains with caves. Stay there for a couple days. When they're done searching for you, then go back. Because if you go back sooner, they're going to find you. And they did just what she said, and they made it back and gave a report back to Joshua about what's going on. So that's kind of the story that we're going to look at today. We're going to start talking about what was going on in this story and see how it might apply to our lives today.
So point number one is we were here before and failed. And I mean, this is a 40-year span between the first time they went to the Jordan River with Moses. Yes. With Moses, and kind of decided this is not the time to go in. So do you see that as a failure or something different?
Well, we were here before and failed is one way to look at it. We didn't succeed. But some things we really struggle with this when we're having this conversation. What is failure, really? I mean, how many of you, let me just do a question. How many of you ever failed a test in school? Yeah, failed a test. Yeah, I didn't realize there'd be that many stupid people. So,
oh, no.
So let me be confessional. I have one F on my report card through school. I went all through school, and here's the F I had. It was, and I've got to understand, I have a college degree, seminary degree, PhD. I've only gotten one F in my life that's ever been on there. It was in driver's ed. And
that explains so much.
It does, doesn't
Just
it?
kidding.
So, but I want you to know that failure is not final. And the reason I got the F, it was in high school in St. Petersburg, and I was 16 years old. I moved from Tennessee when I was 15. I'd gone back home for vacation at 16. I already had a Tennessee driver's license. So I'd been driving for years because I grew up kind of in a rural area of Tennessee. So, and I was a very good driver. I've deteriorated since then. But back in those days, I took the driver's ed class, and it was supposed to be on a Monday, and I went to the 10 o'clock at Monday, and my schedule was shifting. So they said, no, you need to take driver's ed at 8 o'clock. So I went on Tuesday at 8 o'clock. But after 6 weeks, I got an F, and I went to the guy and said, why did I get an F? He said, you never turned in any homework assignments. On the first day of class, I handed out all the things you had to fill out for the 6 weeks, and you never, I said, I didn't get it. He said, well, you were in study hall. I said, yeah, I thought it was study hall. I thought we'd just wait, and I didn't know. He said, no, I can't, I'll give you an F. Well, let me just say, I got a B average. It's because when he'd ask one question, I would write 2-page response. Then when he get my stuff, I went overboard just to prove that I was not an F student. But failure isn't final. So you failed driver's ed the first 6 weeks, but you pass it with a B. So my question is, how many things do we think we failed but we really didn't? How many things that didn't go well at the beginning, but maybe it just set us up to excel more than what we could have done? So I think that they look back 40 years before they'd been here, and they didn't go into the promised land. And there's some reasons. They sent 12 spies in the land. 10 came back and said, don't go in. The 2 came back and said, let's go in. And who do you listen to, the 10 or the 2? They listened to the 10. But was it failure? Because here they are 40 years later at the same place. Maybe sometimes it's good for us to not have everything as soon as we want it, because there is a little expression, too much, too soon. is the perfect formula for mediocrity. And sometimes we need to take not the shortcut, but we need to take the long way around. And for some, you say, well, I failed in that instance. Yes, you may have failed in that instance, but you did not fail in the long run. You kept doing what you needed to do. So, here before and they failed, but sometimes it may be better to explain that a little more.
So was that a necessary time of transformation? As in there was some turnover, obviously, of leadership and different people kind of being brought up. I mean, 40 years seems to be long enough to kind of change your mind about a few things. So when you look at something like that, where they're returning to the same place with the same goal in mind, right? We're going to conquer the city. Not really something that you can do halfway. You either win or you lose. So this is like a life or death situation for these people. Was it transformational, that time, the 40 years taking the long way around?
I think so. I think that they had slave minds, slave dispositions. They weren't warriors. And there was a couple of guys that said, we can take it, and if God is with us, we can do it. And they believed that, and they were willing to go in and try. But the group went around longer, maybe because they needed time to develop their warrior mentality and get out of the slave mentality. And some of us who've been around a while, we realize that if we'd have jumped too soon, it might not have gone well for us. I love to tell the story of Suncoast, that when Suncoast was formed 21 years ago, I've often looked back and thought, boy, I would like to have started this church 10 years earlier. Just because the economy was a little different, I would have been a little younger, and it takes a lot of energy. And I was 41 years old. So I thought 10 years would have been better, but as I think about it, I wasn't ready. And if we'd have started 10 years earlier, there's a high probability we would not be here today. I may be doing something else. It might have led me down a road to where I just can't do this anymore. It's not working, and things fall apart. So sometimes when you look back, you see that failure was a stepping stone to a greater success. So here's the good news for those of you who've been stumbling, and I like the word stumbling or struggling. Sometimes when you stumble in life, sometimes when you struggle in life, don't be caught up in it. It doesn't define you. There's so much more. I mean, failure is the fertile ground for future success. I love these. Failure is often the prelude to success. There is no one secret to success. You hear the secret to success. There's not one. There are many. But the number one is persistence, and just stay at it. So I love this too. Success, let me say it better. Failure is not final. But listen to this. Success is not final either. It's called life. And life sometimes is dynamic. It's the courage to continue, I think, that counts. So, I think that we make mistakes in life, and we just need to learn from them and not keep repeating them.
Right. So how do you keep yourself from repeating the same mistakes over and over again?
Well, come to Suncoast every week, and maybe you get an insight into how that works. Because one of the things we tried to show you is that being human is part of life. And that as your pastor, that there are many things that we go through, and we all have struggles in life. Everyone stumbles from time to time, but it's that you look higher, you aim higher, you find the greater trajectory for your life, and it's better to aim high and miss than to always aim low and hit, right? And life has some dynamics to it. So I just challenge you, keep trying to be the best version of you that you can be. And let me throw Jesus in here for a minute, because I think the Spirit of Christ is that which motivates us to be better than we are. It's that love and grace that fills us. It's that embracing, God all around us, I think, that helps us become more than what we are.
So is the past an important part in trajecting or kind of lining yourself up with the best version of yourself? Or is the past something that you should just leave in the past?
Well, I think the past has value. And I think for someone to set the trajectory, you need to look in the past and see where you've been. And then you look in the present and see where you are. And then you look to the future and see where you think you should be. Does that make sense? This is not really that complicated, but sometimes we get so busy in life that we get up every day, we do the same thing. We've got kids, we've got responsibilities, and we just do what we have to do. We handle the immediate. But when we can take a moment and reflect, and so this is where I came from, and this is where I am. And some people do that, but they don't look at where they can be. And what I see is huge potential. I know a lot of you personally, and I just see the potential in your life and in the life of the staff at Suncoast and the life of my friends here at Suncoast. There's so much more that we can have and so much more that I think you deserve. And I want you to find it and live in it. I think it's an important part.
So how can we look at our past realistically? I know sometimes, I mean, if you have a good friend that you confide in and then they can kind of, or sometimes going to counseling, they can kind of remember the things that you've said before that you've struggled with. So a lot of times accountability and just talking about your perceived failures and what you want in life is good. But how can you do that accurately? How can you look at your past and really say, this is where I messed up, or this is where this and this happened that, I think sometimes it is difficult because when you look back, a lot of times hindsight can be 20/20, or it can be kind of fantasy. You can say, oh, I didn't really do as bad as I did, or I did worse than I actually did. So how can you take a realistic approach to looking at your past so that you can actually succeed in the future?
Yeah, I think that's important. I think when you look back and you see all the things that brought you to where you are, there are many factors, but there's one that I think is tremendous, and it's taking personal responsibility. So when I take personal responsibility for the past, you say, well, I can't take all the responsibility for all the good things that happened to me, but I made choices, and when bad things happen, usually it's because I made choices that set it up. So you may not want to hear this, but some of you are here today in a negative circumstance because of choices you made, and some of you are in a positive circumstance because of choices you made. But tomorrow, when you realize choices make a difference in the way my life turns out, make the better choices. And sometimes we have to chronicle that. They used to say, hindsight's 20/20. Another way to look at that is, you can look at your life, you can live your life looking through the rearview mirror, or you can look out the front window. And I choose to glance at the rearview mirror, but always look ahead. It's a better trajectory for my life.
So you mentioned personal responsibility. That's core value number 2 at
That's right.
Suncoast. So what does that actually look like? Because saying that, even saying like me, okay, Rita, take responsibility for your life. I can say that all day long, but when it comes time to actually do it, sometimes I forget that there's a feeling that comes along with it. There can be guilt, there can be shame when you do mess up. So what does it actually look like to practice taking personal responsibility?
I think that for me, if I own it, and by saying that, sometimes I have to apologize, because sometimes I may say things that I don't really mean to go that way. And I've been married for 43 years, and I have apologized many, many times. And I find this will help me, so I want to talk to the men just a minute. Ladies, don't pay attention to this. Men, that's right, here's some words that will help you in your relationship. When you say, I am sorry, I'll pay for it, it helps.
Well, I think ladies can also take that too. I apologize.
And do you pay for it?
Yeah, we're equal.
Yeah. I would say you're more than equal. Okay, fair enough? Yeah. But I say it in jest because I think it's important for us to understand that when I say to my wife, I'm so sorry, if I had that to do over again, I would not act that way or would not do that. Most recently, she's in here, I hope, but we travel a lot together, and sometimes she's my navigator. And sometimes, she doesn't navigate me exactly the way I want her to. And I say, I cannot believe I missed that exit. And she basically says, well, then you can just navigate yourself. And I come back in a time of reflection, I go, I can either navigate myself or I can apologize. And I apologize because it's the right thing to do. She's doing the best she can do. And sometimes, as a matter of fact, and always, that should be enough. So in the way that you maintain good relationship, you take personal responsibility. It's my fault. I blew it, and I'm so sorry, and I don't want to be that way. And that's not just in your spouse or significant other. It could be at work. It could be with colleagues. And this is scary. Try it with your kids. Hey, tell your children, I'm sorry. I was a little tired. I was a little cranky. I overreacted, and I'm so sorry. Your kids are very forgiving, and we grow from that. When I take responsibility, I open the window for my life to be better. When I blame other people, I just simply push that responsibility down the road, and I don't change because it's never my fault. When it's my fault, I need to change. I think that's part of it.
And I think that opens up some understanding from others. I mean, how much better is it when somebody does something that annoys you and then they're like, wait, hold on, that was me. There's this feeling of the tension release. There's this feeling of you give people the opportunity to say, it's okay.
Right.
And you can move forward. I mean, how many times do you see someone who makes a mistake and then they just don't claim it? And it's like, you could though. And they could just make the whole situation so much better. But it is a little difficult. So, I think a part of life, what you said before, is that there will be failures or perceived failures over and over again. And the best way to learn from them is, while it's happening in the moment, realize that it's happening. Take inventory of your life and say, this is what it feels like to fail, and this is what it feels like to take responsibility.
Exactly. No, that's well said. And in the story, one of the things I noticed differently for Joshua, they did different the second time. Instead of sending out 12,
Right.
he sent out how many?
2.
It's quite a bit different, isn't it?
Yeah.
So instead of trying to get a committee to make this decision, let's just go with a small group. And if you've ever been a part of committees or boards or something that meets once a month and tries to make policy for things they don't know what they're talking about, then you've probably been in the church. I grew up in the church where I've been in church leadership my whole life. I was on the board before I was ever a pastor. I've served on many boards. And what I discovered as a pastor is that many times it's frustrating for a leader to try to lead when you have people who really don't know what they're doing, trying to determine whether you go in or not. And I think these 12 who went in, 10 may not have made the best judgment, at least from Joshua's standpoint. He's like, I'm only going to send 2. I'm going to keep this simple. I don't need a big consensus. I want to make the decision as a leader based on good information. So sometimes it's different the second time.
Yeah. I think that leads perfectly into point number 2, what's different this time? So a lot of times people maybe wait for external circumstances to change, as in, my life looks different, maybe I'm living somewhere different, or the people around me are different. Is that the kind of change that we're talking about, or is it something deeper?
I think it's something inside that changes. I think if you're not growing and you're not changing, then you're probably not at your best self. The better self of you says, hey, there's always room for growth. And usually the change is not just that, well, if the wind blows differently or the sun is out, it's usually from the inside that changes. It's not my external circumstances. It's not that they were at the river at a different place. They were at the river as different people. And I think that changed. And you can look back on your life. Those of you, take a memory trip. You're not the same person today that you were 10 years ago. You've grown. And my hope for you is that in 10 years from now, you'll be continuing to grow every day of that journey along the way as well. So I think it's persistence and staying at it. And we have a quote about that I'd like to put on the screen if we can. This is from Theodore Roosevelt. And there it is. Let me read it for you and you can follow along. This is what the president said. It's not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes short again and again because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those whose cold, timid souls, who neither know victory nor defeat. That's a great quote. I have a cousin who teaches at Flagler University, and before he has his finance class, he tells this quote because it's so easy to criticize, and criticism is cheap. But creating something of value, get on the playing field, because I think you can make a difference. I think that back in this original story, it's very easy for the people to criticize Joshua and what he was going to do. What he's saying, we're going in. We don't need a lot of consensus. We didn't get to this river to just stay here forever. There's going to be something that happens. And if you want to be critical, you probably will never accomplish the things in your life. Criticizing those who do, those who don't should never criticize those who do. It's a short phrase, isn't it? But get in the field and make a difference, because I think we can.
And I think doing and failing is the best way to find meaning, to find that reason why you keep doing and keep going. And, you watch movies and the hero, usually there's a journey that they go on and they experience probably really, really difficult times. And maybe you're watching and you're like, oh, they're not going to make it out of this. Like, this is bad for them, but you're rooting for them. And then they find that spark, that reason to stand up again, and then that's the victory, that's the triumph. And there's something about the human spirit that we're so drawn to that. We're so drawn to failure not being final, that you can see somebody do something over and over again. And you have a great story about this with your brother.
Yeah, my brother Jimmy was he smoked his whole life from the time he was a kid until he was about 50 years old. And I was 6 years younger than him. And in my 20s and 30s, I loved my brother. And but when he'd be smoking, he'd say, I'm going to quit. So I'd try to help him. So when he'd be smoking and he's in the car, I'd reach over and grab a cigarette and throw it out the window. Or he'd always say, when I'm done with this pack of cigarettes, I'm going to be finished, or this carton. So when he'd have his cigarettes in his front pocket, I'd reach over and hug him and I'd crush his cigarettes. He said, what are you doing? Those are expensive. I said, I'm just trying to help you because I love you. And we're adults and he couldn't do anything about it. And as a kid, I'd gotten beat up. It's kind of payback for all those times. But my brother quit smoking 500 times. But 501, it finally took. And he didn't smoke the last 15 or 20 years of his life. And I was so grateful because I think it was in his best health interest, and we want what's best for him. But here's the point. Some of us will struggle and struggle and struggle. Keep trying, because maybe you'll fail miserably for 500 times, or maybe you stumble for 500 times, but one day you'll succeed. With God's help, I think you can.
Is there any chance at avoiding failure altogether?
No. It's part of life. Failure, if you don't fail, then you're not trying. And I'd say rather than have a permanent failure, it's just a stumble. It's a temporary failure. Get back on your feet. Strive for greater things.
Well, speaking of getting back on my feet, I'm going to leave you to tell the closing story.
Okay, thank you, Rita. So let me tell you a story. And see if you can relate to this. There's once a lady who woke up one morning and she noticed in the mirror that there were only 3 hairs on her head. Well, she said, I think I'll braid my hair today. And she did. She had a wonderful day. The next day she woke up and she only had 2 hairs on her head. She looked in the mirror and she said, well, I think I'll part my hair down the middle today. And she did, and she had a grand day. The next day she woke up, she looked in the mirror, and she only had 1 hair on her head. And she said, oh, I think I'm going to have a ponytail today. And she had a magnificent day. Finally, the next day she woke up and she looked in the mirror, and there wasn't a single hair on her head. Yay, she exclaimed. I don't have to fix my hair today. See, attitude is everything. I mean, be kinder than necessary. For everyone we meet is fighting some kind of battle. Live simply, love generously, care deeply, speak kindly. Life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. And even when you're dancing in the rain, you may slip and fall. Now what? When you fall, get up. Start over. Why? Because it's really not falling. It's how you get up that makes a difference. Let me say a prayer. Father, open our hearts to more of you. Open our hearts to more of life. Bless us that we may bless others. Live in us, we pray. In Christ's name, amen. God bless you so much for coming. Thanks.